The first thing I noticed when I walked into the engagement party wasn't the crystal chandeliers or the live string quartet. It was the dirt on my boots. Vanessa, my brother's heiress fiancée, spotted me instantly. "Look who decided to show up," she sneered, loud enough for everyone to hear. "The filthy grape picker is here." I didn't flinch at the insult. I flinched at what was hanging around her neck. My grandmother's vintage locket. The one promised to me. When I looked at my mother, she just shrugged. "Vanessa appreciates history, Monica. You just get it dirty." Before I tell you what I did next, drop a comment and let me know where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. I'd love to know who's part of our community. I didn't storm out of the party. I didn't throw a drink or scream or give them the satisfaction of a breakdown. I simply turned around, walked through the service entrance and went down the stone stairs to the reserve cellar. The air down here is always exactly 55 degrees. It smells of French oak, aging tannins and patience. It's the smell of my life's work. Upspread, they were drinking my wine, a 2018 Cabernet that had won gold in France, without having the faintest idea who had blended it. I sat on a wooden crate and pulled out my phone. My hands weren't shaking. In fact, I felt a strange, cold clarity, like the fog lifting off the vineyard at dawn. To my family, I was Monica the failure. Monica the farmhand who couldn't cut it in the corporate world. But the deed to the Golden Leaf estate is in a trust, and the sole beneficiary of that trust is me. I bought this land 5 years ago when it was nothing but dried out dirt and potential. I turned it into the premier vineyard in the valley. My parents think the estate is owned by a foreign investment group that lets me live in the cottage out back as part of my laborer wages. I never corrected them. I opened my banking app. It was the first of the month, which meant the automatic transfer was scheduled for tomorrow morning. $5,200. That was the amount I sent my parents every single month. I labeled it estate dividends in the transfer description, letting them believe it was a payout from a small investment grandma had left. It wasn't. It was my profit. It was the sweat from my brow and the dirt from my fingernails. For a long time I lied to myself about why I sent it. I told myself it was duty. I told myself I didn't want them to worry about their mortgage or their medical bills. But sitting there in the dark with the memory of Vanessa wearing my grandmother's locket still burning in my mind, I finally admitted the truth. I wasn't being a dutiful daughter. I was being a gambler. I had been playing a rigged game for years. I thought that if I removed all their stress, if I paid for the lifestyle they couldn't afford, if I fixed every problem before they even knew it existed, then maybe, just maybe, they would finally have the emotional capacity to love me. I thought love was something you could buy if the price was high enough. I thought if I put enough coins into the slot machine of my parents' affection, eventually I would hit the jackpot. But looking at that pending transfer, I realized the machine was broken. It didn't matter how much I put in. It was never going to pay out. They took the money, credited it to their own good fortune, and used the emotional space I bought them to dote on Justin and his fraudster fiancé. I wasn't a daughter to them. I was a silent utility company, keeping the lights on so they could shine on someone else. I tapped the screen. The option to cancel recurring payment popped up. A warning box appeared asking if I was sure. I had never been more sure of anything in my life. I pressed confirm. The screen flashed. Transfer cancelled. $5,200 stayed in my account. It was a small act, invisible to everyone upstairs, but down here in the dark, it felt like the first breath of air I'd taken in years. The transaction was over. The Bank of Monica was officially closed. I stood up and brushed the dust off my jeans. The party was still going on upstairs. I could hear the muffled thump of the bass and the laughter of people who thought they were better than me. I decided it was time to rejoin them. Not to participate but to watch. I wanted to see exactly who these people were when they thought they were winning. I slipped back into the ballroom, leaning against a limestone pillar near the bar. I wanted to see the show from the cheap seats. Or in my case, the free seats, since I owned the building. The atmosphere had shifted. The string quartet had stopped, and Vanessa was holding a microphone, standing on the raised dais with my brother Justin. She was in the middle of a speech about her solar empire. It was a masterclass in buzzwords. She talked about disrupting the energy grid and leveraging green assets, without actually saying a single concrete thing about what her company did. My parents were in the front row, looking up at her with an adoration they had never wasted on me. They weren't just proud, they were hungry. They looked at Vanessa and saw their retirement plan. They saw a second chance at the high life they felt they deserved. Vanessa paused to take a sip of wine. It was my estate's signature vintage, a 2015 Cabernet Sauvignon that retailed for $200 a bottle. She took a sip, wrinkled her nose and handed the glass to a passing server with a look of distaste. "A bit acidic for my taste," she announced into the microphone, getting a ripple of polite laughter from the crowd. "But I suppose when you're in the rustic part of the valley, You make do with what you have. We'll be serving real wine at the wedding in Paris. The server she handed the glass to was Elias, my head vintner. He was 60 years old and had forgotten more about wine than Vanessa would ever learn. I saw his jaw tighten, but he took the glass with a bow. I couldn't help myself. I stepped forward. Actually, I said, my voice cutting through the laughter. That acidity is intentional. It's a high-altitude Cabernet. It needs to breathe for 20 minutes to open up. If you drink it straight from the bottle, you miss the point. The room went quiet. Vanessa looked down at me from the stage, her eyes narrowing. Oh look, she said, smiling that shark-like smile. The farmhand has an opinion. That's adorable, Monica. Did you read that on the back of a box? I read it in the soil reports, I said calmly. Because I know this land. Vanessa laughed, a sharp barking sound. She turned to the crowd, gesturing at me like I was a prop in her comedy routine. You see what I have to deal with, she said. This is the problem with people who work with their hands. They think getting dirt under their fingernails makes them experts in taste. But class isn't about how hard you sweat, Monica. It's about how smart you work. Some of us build empires with our minds. Others just dig holes. My parents laughed. My father, Robert, actually clapped his hands. She's got you there, Monica, he called out. Leave the thinking to the professionals. I stood there letting the insult wash over me. But instead of anger, I felt a strange, cold fascination. It was the theater of absurdity. Here was a woman who produced absolutely nothing. Her empire was a shell company. Her stories were lies. Her entire existence was parasitic. She fed off the value others created. And she was standing there mocking me for being a laborer. It was the ultimate irony of the grifter. She believed that fraud was a higher form of intelligence than creation. She thought that because she stole value, she was superior to the person who made it. It was the Dunning-Kruger effect of status. She didn't realize that without people like me, people who dig the holes, plant the vines, and harvest the grapes, people like her would starve. He thought she was the queen of the castle. She didn't realize she was just a vandal breaking windows in a house she didn't own. I caught Elias's eye. He gave me a barely perceptible wink. He knew. I knew. And soon everyone else would know too. You're right, Vanessa, I said, backing away. I'll go back to digging holes. You enjoy your spotlight. She turned back to her adoring audience, basking in their applause. She didn't notice that I wasn't walking toward the exit. I was walking toward the security office. The spectacle wasn't over. Vanessa clapped her hands, demanding silence again. And now, she announced, her voice trembling with theatrical emotion, I have a surprise. I flew them in from our estate in Monaco just for tonight. Please welcome the people who made me who I am. My parents, the Duke and Duchess of Solar, Richard and Eleonora. The double doors swung open. A couple walked in looking like they had just stepped off a yacht. The man was silver-haired and distinguished, wearing a linen suit. The woman was draped in pearls, holding a tiny dog. The crowd gasped. My parents, Robert and Susan, practically vibrated with excitement. They rushed forward, abandoning their dignity entirely to greet these titans of industry. I squinted. The lighting in the ballroom was dim, designed to flatter, but I have 20/20 vision. I watched Richard shake my father's hand. I watched him flash a practiced, charming smile, the kind of smile you learn in a workshop. And then it hit me. I knew him. I didn't know him from a boardroom or a Forbes list. I knew him from a casting call I'd held 18 months ago. His name wasn't Richard. It was Barry. He was a C-list commercial actor from Sacramento. I had hired him to play Grandpa Joe in a 30-second spot for our Autumn Harvest Festival. He had spent 4 hours complaining about the craft services and asking if the role would make him eligible for a union card. I looked at the Duchess. She looked vaguely familiar too, probably an extra from the same agency. I watched my father bow his head slightly as Barry clapped him on the shoulder. Robert, Barry boomed using his stage voice. Vanessa tells us you've raised a fine son. We're honored to merge our dynasties. My father beamed. He actually glowed. The honor is ours, Richard. We've always known Justin was meant for great things. It was a scene so pathetic it made my stomach turn. My parents were fawning over a man I had paid $300 to eat a grape on camera. They were desperate for his approval. They looked at these paid liars and saw everything they wished they were. And that's when the real heartbreak set in. It wasn't about the fraud. It was about the replacement. I realized then why they had given away my locket. I realized why they had erased me. They didn't love Vanessa and her family because they were good people. They loved them because they were a mirror. Vanessa reflected back the image my parents wanted to see of themselves. Wealthy, important, aristocratic. I was the mirror they wanted to smash. When they looked at me with my work boots and my calloused hands, they saw the truth. They saw the struggle, the debt, the mediocrity they had actually come from. I was the reality they were trying to escape. Vanessa was the fantasy they wanted to inhabit. They weren't just choosing a daughter-in-law. They were choosing a replacement child. They were trading in the daughter who kept them alive for a daughter who made them feel special. I watched my mother laugh at something the fake Duchess said, a high, girlish giggle I hadn't heard in years. She looked so happy. She was living in a delusion and she loved it more than she had ever loved me. Nice performance, Barry, I whispered to myself. I turned away from the sickening display. I had seen enough. I knew the actors. Now I needed to know the script. If Vanessa had hired a cast for her engagement party, this wasn't just a lie. It was a production. And productions leave paper trails. I slipped out the side door and pulled out my phone. It was time to make a call to the only person who hated bad acting more than I did. My forensic accountant. I walked out to the terrace, the cool night air hitting my face like a splash of cold water. Inside, the applause was still thundering for the fake Duke and Duchess. Outside, it was just me and the silence of the vines. I pulled out my phone and dialed. It rang once before she picked up. It's Saturday night, Monica, a sharp voice said. This better be good. It's better than good, Sarah. It's actionable, I said. Sarah was my forensic accountant, a woman who found more joy in a spreadsheet than most people found in a marriage. I need you to run a name for me. Right now. Who? Vanessa. Claims to be the CEO of a company called Solaris Green Tech. Her father is supposedly a Richard somebody, Duke of Solar, currently played by a commercial actor named Barry. I heard the rapid clicking of a keyboard on the other end. Solaris Green Tech, Sarah muttered. Give me 30 seconds. I waited, looking back through the glass doors. Vanessa was holding court, showing off her engagement ring. A ring I knew my brother had put on a credit card he couldn't pay off. My mother was touching the fake Duchess's pearls with reverence. They looked so desperate. It was painful to watch. Okay, Sarah said, her voice dropping an octave. We have a problem. Define problem. Solaris Green Tech doesn't exist. Well, it exists as a registered LLC in Delaware, but it has 0 assets, 0 employees and no physical address. Zishel Monica. A ghost. And the money? I asked. She claims she's worth millions. She's worth -8 million, Sarah corrected. I'm looking at judgments against the LLC. Unpaid vendors, defaulted loans, a lawsuit from a venture capital firm in Texas. But here's the kicker. The signer on the incorporation documents isn't Vanessa. Who is it? Valerie. Valerie. Let me check the last name. Valerie Jenkins. And Monica? I'm running a background check on Valerie Jenkins right now. She has outstanding warrants for wire fraud in Nevada and Florida. I closed my eyes. It wasn't just a lie. It was a felony. She's a fugitive, I whispered. She's a professional predator, Sarah said. She finds families that look wealthy but are desperate for status, dazzles them with fake tech money, and then drains their credit before moving on. She's probably already opened lines of credit in your brother's name. My blood ran cold. My idiot brother with his leased BMW and his desperate need to be important. He wasn't marrying an heiress. He was marrying a parasite that was going to leave him bankrupt and possibly in jail as an accomplice. Send me everything, I said. The warrants, the shell company filings, the headshot of Richard, if you can find his casting profile. Everything. Sent, Sarah said. Do you want me to call the police? Not yet, I said, watching Vanessa laugh inside the ballroom. I want her to see it first. I want my parents to see exactly what they bought with my inheritance. I hung up. A second later, a PDF arrived. Mugshots, court records, a trail of fraud across 3 states. I walked to the AV booth where my estate manager, Elias, stood guard. Plug this in, I said. Override the slideshow. On stage, my father was mid-toast about legacy. I stepped up, took the microphone from his stunned hand and faced the room. I have a gift, I said. Since my parents gave away my grandmother's locket, I thought I'd return the favor, with the truth. The screens went dark, then lit up with documents. Vanessa's bankrupt shell company, a fake Duke, exposed as an actor, and finally a mugshot. Name Valerie Jenkins. Charges: wire fraud, identity theft, grand larceny. The room froze. She's not an heiress, I said calmly. She's a fugitive. Valerie screamed, lunging at the stage, but I only raised my hand. Elias stepped forward with real security. The police are at the gate, he said. Your orders, Ms. Owner? The word hit like a blade. Yes, I said. Escort them out. My father stared at me in horror. Owner. I bought this land, I replied. Every vine, every brick. I paid your bills while you called me a failure. I turned to Valerie. You're standing on my land, drinking my wine and wearing my locket. I held out my hand. She dropped it. The police lights flashed outside. When the doors closed, the celebration was gone. So was their illusion. The transfers are cancelled, I said. I'm keeping my money. You chose Justin. Let him figure it out. I walked out into the vineyard as dawn broke over the hills, the air clean and honest. I fastened the locket around my neck. I wasn't invisible anymore. I wasn't the laborer. I was the owner, and for the first time I knew exactly what I was worth.